So if you didn't watch, I was on Surviving Barstool, where it's basically it was 8 of us. We had to live in the New York City office, and they had to vote us off one by one. And I got voted off first, partially because they were terrified that I sleptwalked. But part of the rule was if you leave the office at any moment, you could only go downstairs to the lobby to get food if you ordered food on like Postmates or whatever. But if you step foot outside the office, you're automatically disqualified. Well, I sleptwalked, and I came to in the fucking subway system. I was in the subway. It's 4 a.m. I had no shoes on. I had weird fucking pants on. Yeah. I didn't tell anybody this because I didn't want to get disqualified at the time. So
You made it to the subway?
I made it to the subway. I was underground, Ed.
This is dangerous.
You should be dead.
I told my dad the story because he knows about because he's had to call the police, report me missing before.
This is insane.
And is
So
this
he was pissed
sleepwalking
at
or
me.
you were blacked out?
No, and Donnie will corroborate this. So for like 45 minutes prior to us going to sleep, and we had been drinking, obviously, Donnie and I couldn't figure out how to turn the lights off in the gambling cave, and we didn't want to pass out with the lights on. So we stopped drinking for a while, and he fell asleep listening to some podcast. It wasn't Joe Rogan, but it was a similar like conspiracy theory podcast, whatever it was. I fell asleep listening to Serial because I hadn't listened to Serial in a few years. I'm like, I want to listen to Serial. So that's what I did, and like I was obviously
That's
I
an
had been
insane
drinking.
move too, but we'll let that one slide.
I had been drinking, but I knew that was easy to fall asleep to, you know?
Okay.
So I just threw it in my headphones. I was out like a light in 5 minutes. But no, it was not some blackout-induced coma. But in the meantime, after I came to, who knows how long I was out there for, I had to piss my fucking brains out. My feet are just like icicles. So I leaned up against the side of the building, and I just let one rip right on the side of the building. And I'm like letting the piss stream between my legs. So I had to like widen my legs up a lot. And then I finally fucking yanked the door open, not the turnstile door, but the door next to it, hard enough where I could squeeze in, which is probably not – they probably want to fix that so intruders don't get in, like actual intruders. I got upstairs, and I called Nick, and he let me in, and I was like, yeah, I just sleptwalked, man. Like, let me in. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, I just sleptwalked. So that's the story. It was not – didn't have anything to do with alcohol at all. I just sleptwalked.
This is like the magic.
Were you really
of,
barefoot?
Dude, my feet were black, Ed.
Oh, my God.
Imagine walking around in the subway in that filthy fucking city with bare feet.
You're lucky you didn't step on like
The
a
third
heroin
rail?
needle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have without knowing it. I told my dad the story when I was picking up my dog, you know, after I had gotten back already, and he was legitimately pissed at me. As if I could control it, but I mean, he's had to deal with this his whole life, and he's like, "When are you gonna like stop doing this?" I'm like, "I would like to stop doing it right now. It's not really up to me." So I wish I would not have told him that, but yeah, it was
Alcohol was not an influence.
It was not an influence. It was not an influence.
You can say that definitively?
I can say that 100% definitively. I promise this. Like, and I mean, you can go back and ask Pat if you want. Like, that was on like a random weekday, middle of the night thing when neither of us were drinking. Like,
is
it's
this
just
the
something I
most
do.
dangerous sleepwalking you've done?
The first time that I can remember was in the very first house I grew up in Warrenville, and I sleptwalked. My parents had one of those Dodge Caravan like conversion vans that had the bed that you could lay flat, like in Seinfeld when when George is banging his cousin or whatever, and or when Frank's banging Estelle and George and his cousin walk in on them, is what it was, in Central Park. It was like one of those, and I sleptwalk in there, and I just fell asleep, and my parents called the cops and reported me missing. They thought I got kidnapped. And then a couple hours later, they just found me in the van. Like, I just do it. And I don't know.
You are one of a kind, Dave. You really are.
But, like, of course, it has to happen when I'm in an office that is laced with surveillance cameras over every inch of it. So the next morning, I was like, fuck. I'm like, this is going to be embarrassing. I'm like, you just got to roll with it.
Gotta own it.
Got to own it.
Oh, David.